Hi, everyone. This is Kerry Cassidy from Project CAMELOT. And, well, I've got a strange goings on today. I was going to be having a conversation with Robert David Steele, who initiated it with me. However, he then found out he is not supposed to cover anything to do with space. And as our topics are going to obviously cover things in space, around space, and from space, he is not going to be able to join us after all. So I'm here on my own for the moment, and I will have a chat room here if I can kind of figure that out, and you can ask me questions, etc. But what I'm going to do here is kind of cover what's been going on because it's really a wild time we're going through right now. And I've got my website over here in the right-hand side, and that's what I'm going to be referring to. So it should still be quite an interesting show. We'll cover the same kinds of things that actually Robert and I were going to cover anyway. So that should be just fine anyway. So what I'm going to do is kind of give a rundown. Now, I want to direct everyone to go to my front page and to look at the latest article that I put on there. And if you wouldn't mind, because that will give you a heads up on what I'm going to discuss here. And then I've got some notes that I'm also going to use to go over all the different topics, because as you can obviously appreciate, we have a full plate in terms of what has been hitting the airwaves and the news and so on. And it's really wild and crazy. So to start off with, obviously there's been a recent disclosure announcement by Tom DeLonge. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that news, I suggest you just do a search under his last name. He's a member of I think, a band. And the band is called, I think it's called Blink 180, but don't quote me on that. I actually don't have the name of his band in front of me, and I don't know the music. So I apologize for that. He has gotten very involved in this whole disclosure story, and so he is now banding up with a couple of, well, with several sort of heavy hitters, you might say. And they're doing something called To the Stars. And this is an organization he's starting, apparently, in order to try to cover what's going on the planet to do with developing free energy, really, I would say, is maybe their big focused. They've got an illustrious scientist who is... hold on one second, because I've got a whole list of stuff here for who's involved, but it's okay. I've got, it's Hal Puthoff is one of the main people involved, and I apologize. I'm going to have to be searching around while I'm talking here because I've got information in a lot of different places. There's a Jim Semivan who's come forward and has supposedly been working for the CIA, although Dan Smith, who is a commentator and a person who is somewhat read in to some degree on the secret space program by way of his friend Ron Pandolfi, is contesting whether or not Jim Semivan is indeed who he says he is, which I think is kind of interesting. And if you go in Wikipedia, Jim Semivan, his name, it does appear that he is who he says he is. At least he's certainly in public out there and under that name and so on. So whether that's his real name or what discrepancy is going on there, I don't know. I can say that this is a very interesting dynamic. Hal Puthoff, of course, is associated with SRI, Ingo Swann, and the whole remote viewing situation that was coming out of Stanford University, Stanford Research, and that's SRI, Stanford Research Institute. So for him to get on board with Tom DeLonge is an interesting maneuver. I think this may come out of an altruistic side to Hal. I see this in a good light on Hal's part, and that he wants to be part of something to move the information in the secret space program into the mainstream. So that's what's going on. I think for him, he has been active in a huge way to do with free energy in the background, and he has signed numerous security oaths, etc., I'm sure. And he is, I forget his name in the aviary, but he's one of the head, what they call aviary, and he's been active behind the scenes in the UFO context as well. I have had some brief, I guess, dialogue with him in the past around early days of Project CAMELOT, but I don't know him well. Now there are other players that are being mentioned here, and again, going to go back to my notes so I get some of the names right. Now I don't have everybody's name. I do apologize for that. So we have Lou Alessandro, or Alessandro, is going to be their so-called head of security. And he says he's dealt with, what are they calling them? They're calling UFOs by a different name. I think unidentified threats, I think he called it, something like that, which is quite wild and interesting. They don't want to use the word UFO, I guess, because of the stigma attached, so that they can kind of try to get out from under the problem of being, well, among the mainstream sort of investigators, such as myself and others who have been investigating this subject for many, many years. But on top of it, there is, of course, the huge litany, Project Blue Book, Project Grunge, and various other investigations, the Rand Institute, and certainly Tavistock in Britain, all investigating UFOs. Many people will know the many witnesses that have come forward over time, certainly Phil Schneider and William Cooper, among some of the most well-known luminaries in this subject matter. Others more recently, Linda Moulton Howe, Rich Dolan, and many, many others. Really too numerous to mention here, but if you're a fan or an observer of Project CAMELOT, you will know what I'm talking about. So all of a sudden they want to call this unidentified threats, I think is something of the nomenclature that they're talking about here. Interesting avoidance of the subject matter, trying to put some kind of quasi-professional sheen, mainstream sheen on this disclosure called To the Stars. Then they talk about an actual incident. That's on the video that Tom DeLonge released, and that's available on YouTube, so you can find it. I've also linked it on my page on this subject matter, and it is on the To the Stars article, so you can go to that article on projectcamelotportal.com. You can also use projectcamelot.tv to get to that website, and we have two URLs going the same place now because people have been complaining that they are blocking us in various countries. So what we have again is this high-profile team of scientists and intelligence agents, as well as Department of Defense and aerospace engineers. And I don't have their list right in front of me. I can probably find it in a little bit here and get some other names. But they do give a small vignette where they actually describe, I guess it's a UFO encounter with the Nimitz, which I thought was pretty kind of an amusing thing, because they're choosing one UFO encounter out of obviously millions and pretending or acting as though this is an unidentified flying object. And I have to tell you that the secret space program, and as a result, the people that are on this panel, I have to give them credit to be at least knowledgeable about the secret space program. And I can tell you that they know exactly, most likely, what kind of craft it was, where it comes from, and the occupants. So it's not really a UFO. It's not really an unidentified aerial threat, as Alessandro, I guess, however you say his name, Alessandro, is claiming on that video. So it's unfortunate, but you have a disclosure with lies right out the gate. But it is a kind of you could call it a semi-official disclosure. Again, sort of going back to the William Tompkins disclosures that were sort of backed by a portion of the Navy, where he actually disclosed that he was reporting to Bobby Ray Inman, Admiral of the Navy, Bobby Ray Inman, very well-known name. And that at that time, of course, those in the know will know that William Tompkins has since passed on. Whether that was of natural causes or not, I'm not sure. And one can always question that. However, he did do a lot of disclosures while he was doing that job. And he clearly made it very obvious that he was under direction. He was under control of, the story was under the control of, one assumes, Bobby Ray Inman at the top. And whether there are people above Inman or indeed ETs who are helping to orchestrate this whole this push to disclosure is in question and must be considered. So what is my premise here? My premise is that all of the news, every single thing you're hearing, all the false flags, the fires in Northern California, the Vegas happening, you name it, all is the result of a push by the ETs who are now coming forward, I believe, in not just one race, although the evidence I have is only about one race, which is the reptoids, and that comes vis-a-vis Mark Richards. However, the bottom line is that if you look at the news and you do not consider the ET side of it, you do not consider that our military is at war with various ET races, and as a matter of fact, has been for quite some time, that there are dissension in the ranks, and that if you go back to the testimony of William Tompkins, you will see very quickly that the Nazis were, of course, helped by a race from Aldebaran, a race of reptilians as well, and that there were some Pleiadians who were helping, at least at the time of William Tompkins' contribution to the secret space aerospace program through Hughes Aerospace and other NASA and during the Apollo landings, etc. So even back in those days, we were being helped by ETs. That means when I say ETs, races that some of which may reside inside the Earth, in inner Earth, as some people call it, and some may be in underground bases of sorts, ET underground bases, ET undersea bases. Some of those beings may consider Earth their home. And then, of course, the ones that have gone out to the various galaxies come from various galaxies, of course, Draco being one of the more notorious. And of course, the reptoids, who are human reptilian hybrids, and they are causing a great deal of problems here on Earth. They are backing certain governments and not others. And they, of course, were backing the Nazis back in the day. Of course, if you followed the work of Jim Marrs and Joseph Farrell, you will know that the Fourth Reich is alive and well here in the United States and being orchestrated as such. And of course, kudos to Jim Marrs, who did pass on, but contributed a great deal to this story that we have that goes far beyond what the people behind the scenes, understandably, of To the Stars. This organization started again by Tom DeLonge, and which is currently doing some disclosure of a very, let's say, complex kind that involves some truth and some falsity. Unfortunately, this is in part of necessity, one imagines, because I don't think they will have the blessing of the whole secret space program. That means that they've got the Illuminati side the side that is run by probably predominantly Satanists, and then the other side, which may be considered as the Bush cabal or a Rockefeller contingent, whether and where the overlaps may happen, who are Satanists within those groups and who are just plain Nazis or fascists, however you want to term them, is unclear. We don't know those necessary divisions and alliances, but we do know that the secret space program is orchestrated in large part by individuals who are members of both those groups. And this gets into the child trafficking and the sort of Satanist agenda, if you will, that dovetails perfectly, if you think about it, with the reptilian agenda and the reptoids and what they're doing to take over Earth here, and having to do with sucking the energy of humans, killing humans for food, using their our juices for aphrodisiacs, etc., and so for torture and other kinds of sacrificial types exercises. All of this is a combination of the, as I say, the agenda of the Satanists and the agenda of the reptoids that does completely coincide. The reptoids being the more, you might say, Nazi side of things, and the Satanists being the more vampiric side of things. There are other races, such as the, well, you would say the mantis beings or mantids, and also there are some dragon moths is another race that has come to the fore. A lot of the races are even unknown, and I would say that's true of the secret space program as well. What we're talking about is, of course, the deep state being involved, being in, to some degree, having a need to know, but quite possibly being read in on certain individuals being more read in than others, as you can appreciate. And the President of the United States, I do want to clarify, because some researchers, some researchers are of the misconception that the president is the highest man on the totem pole, so to speak, in this sort of scenario. And that's simply not the case. So just want to make that very, very clear. This has been known for many, many years, that the president in his office comes and goes every 4 years. As such, he simply does not, from the point of view of the Illuminati and, of course, the various races, does not have a need to know on that level. He's a useful person to them. He is a front man, and he will be given a certain amount of information. And I imagine it's a constant state of frustration for whoever holds that office during the time they're in office, because they are relatively ineffectual. They must do more or less what they're told. And of course, President Kennedy being perhaps the last and only one who attempted to do things outside the box. And we know what happened to him. So this is a ongoing story. The reason I'm bringing all of this up is, again, because of these recent disclosures of the To the Stars agenda. And this is a public agenda. You can go to their website. You can see the players involved. Some of them appear to be aerospace executives, one who was part of Skunk Works. And I don't know if I have his name. I may have his name somewhere here and can quickly get it. Let's see. It was, I don't know, there's one person, Christopher Mellon, Senate State. I'm not sure if he is one of the people involved there on the stage. I have somewhere I did have a list of everybody who was on stage, and I know it's kind of frustrating, but you can get that list, and I do have a printout on another computer that has that list as well. At any rate, one of the people is an executive, an aerospace executive from, I imagine, Hughes Aerospace, and now part of Lockheed Martin, and what's called Skunk Works. And he is someone who, in theory, will be very well read into the secret space program, to the kinds of technology they have and are using today. So what you've got when you've got an organization like this is individuals who are, you might say, straddling two worlds. On the one hand, they have been heavily involved in the secret space program. They are trusted by that program. They are under security oaths by that program. And they are at the same time attempting to do a form of disclosure, soft disclosure, as I call it, being orchestrated, at least in the front of the scenario, by Tom DeLonge, but clearly he is under orders and under control of the program itself and the division which is handling this soft disclosure. And so what does that mean? That means that they are going to be carefully monitoring everything these individuals say and do, which of course they have been monitored their whole lives since they've been chosen to be part of the program. But this will be an added level, and it is an interesting role that they're having to play. It's not going to be an easy role to attempt to be part of an organization that is supposed to be bringing what is in essence the technology they've been using for over 60 years to the public, to actually try to move humans along the line so that we can become really what is in essence a 21st century civilization, instead of one that is really nothing has changed other than the internet and the degree of surveillance. If you go back to the 1960s, it's virtually the same life. People are living the exact same way. There's very little change for most of humanity along these lines. And of course, the gap between the rogue civilization, what is in essence now a rogue civilization, and which is the secret space program that is constantly dealing with various ET races, fighting with them, conducting wars against some of them, having allied relationships with them, having huge meetings, United Nations kinds of meetings, where they have treaty discussions, treaties that get broken periodically along the lines. And all of this being orchestrated under the noses, behind the backs of humanity, who is not sharing in any of the technology, the advanced technology, the ultra advanced technology that these people, the humans that are involved in these programs on and off the planet, are party to. And so you can appreciate how we have deserts that could be turned into Greenlands, and basically, lush places where there can be plenty of water, people could live, etc. So we have no population problem on the earth at all. This is a scarcity agenda that is a misconception. And even people that have been read into the secret space program are convinced of this scarcity agenda because it's been drummed into their heads over and over again, but it simply is incorrect. It's just not real. We don't have scarcity. Scarcity is an illusion. Humans, in fact, have the opposite problem, if anything. We are so creative, so endlessly creative, that we could, with very little trouble, if you took the reptilian domination away from planet Earth at this exact moment, the whole place would change drastically. And of course, if you revealed the ability to tap into things like what in essence is being talked about, things like energy from water, certainly plasma physics, and what is called free energy or 0-point energy. So there is so much out there. All disease could be healed, and our age, the amount of time we live, could be extended indefinitely, etc. So it's an endless amount of things that are going on again in the secret space program, that are part of this rogue civilization, that they are now being pushed to disclose on a more rapid timeline than previously. I can also say that for background to this information I'm giving you, you must watch all of the Project CAMELOT interviews, especially with what are called whistleblowers. And those cross many disciplinary areas. And so what you can do is learn a great deal by adding and connecting the dots. And this is really all I'm doing. It's not rocket science. It's quite easy to do. But what I find is that most people out there, regardless of how much study they do, and this includes my so-called colleagues in this sector, do not have the ability to connect the dots because they are not paying attention, especially to some of the most important witnesses out there. And that has to do with, obviously, people like William Tompkins, people like Mark Richards, Captain Mark Richards, who I've interviewed in prison now 7 times. And all those interviews are available on Project Camelot, and many, many more. In other words, if you're not following the story and connecting the dots, the through line from the beginning of the story until now, then you don't understand what is happening. You do not understand what is going on when the Illuminati decide to conduct a false flag operation, when they decide to test a weapon, such as they are doing in Northern California, when they decide to clear off certain areas of ground, sort of a slash and burn mentality, which is what they've done in a portion of Santa Rosa area. In other words, you do not understand the bigger picture. You don't understand why they're doing this. And so you can't even believe that they are doing it, that it's being orchestrated, but it is. And in fact, what you really need is a map of the globe, and you need to put in, pins. And so it's kind of like going to Mel Gibson and that conspiracy theory movie. In essence, I should have on my wall a huge map of the world with all these pins where all the false flags have been conducted over the last 10 years, starting, or even not even starting, with 9/11, going prior to 9/11, which would be before 10 years, and so on. So we're really talking about a huge scenario, a huge strategic map, a plan. And if you don't understand what your enemy is doing, what their thinking is, then you can't possibly get to the bottom of the crimes being committed against you and humanity on a regular basis. And of course, this is what everyone is trying to do. Everyone in YouTube is trying to, explain and understand what the orchestration behind the scenes. They're trying to follow the clues. And I appreciate that approach. However, if you don't have the wider perspective, you have no context. And if you have no context, then you don't know how one thing links to another. Now, later today, I will be having Paladin, a white hat, as they call themselves, basically a group that had decided to go into investigating the paperwork, the paper trail that revealed the financial backing of the secret space program, the deep state, if you want to call it that as well. And they have revealed in their documentation a great deal of the orchestration through what are called high yield trading programs that have been talked about to some degree in my interviews with them. I've had Paladin on my show. He's also written a blog, a guest blog on my site. But the White Hats, I think their website is now called thewhitehatreports.com, if I have the URL right. But you can find the link. We'll put it on. It's actually on my advertisement that you can see over here where it says Paladin, the White Hat. And that is, again, something that is being, we're going to be discussing, and he is one of those white hats. So he's a forensic financial investigator, and he will be helping people to understand the backing, the financial story, let's say, behind the Vegas shootings, and why that incident or orchestrated event is part of a whole false flag network. Now, last night on my show, we had on very good investigators, which is Dr. Jim Fetzer and also Dr. Scott Bennett, both of whom have been revealing all of the evidence behind the scenes that documents the fact that Vegas is a controlled situation, that it was orchestrated, that it was not a lone gunman, that Paddock is, by all appearances, what we call a Manchurian candidate, a patsy, and it's even possible that he never even fired a gun, and so on. So we've got to look below the surface in a deeper way than what's going on YouTube right now. People have to start understanding that our military has been fighting with various races of ETs behind the scenes, and that these ETs have the ability to wipe the minds and to disconnect your consciousness in such a way that you do not recall seeing them. And this goes for soldiers on a battlefield, whether it's Vietnam with the spider beings, and you can watch my prior shows to see more about that, or whether it's the reptoids who are building stargates in the Middle East and who are the reason there is a constant battle going on in the Middle East, at least partially, because they are very much there. ISIS is at their beck and call. ISIS is reporting to them by way of the CIA. And you must understand that the CIA has many loyalties. They are not just involved with one sort of master, if you will. So the CIA is now a worldwide organization, and they have many divisions, some of whom are actually at war with the other parts of their company. And then, of course, it's to say nothing of the NSA and their role in all of this. Nothing can be considered without understanding the deeper alien, on and off planet, ET, whatever you want to call them, scenario. And I have a whole list of stuff here to go into, so I'm going to continue to talk. And so hopefully this is just not going to go on forever, because, you know, I have so much stuff, and it's actually, it's amazing how never ending it sort of starts to get after you've been doing this, as I've been for over 11 and a half years, going down the rabbit hole, as the saying goes. So we can say, let me see if I can kind of back up just a bit here. So first of all, we've got the disclosure being pushed by reptilians, and I've written an article about this. This is something that Mark Richards said to me in one of my recent interviews with him. He said that the reptoids were underground, causing a lot of the battles in Aleppo to escalate, and that they were coming to the surface and actually revealing their presence because they believe that it will create a chaos on planet Earth. And that is because humans are so completely in the dark as to what's really going on that most of them would sort of, I guess the theory is, panic and lose their minds. You know, so this is the kind of thing that has been talked about, of course, in the past, that you can't handle the truth. Well, I firmly believe that humans can handle the truth. It's actually falsity that they can't handle. It's natural to to what resonates. Resonance has to do with health, and truth resonates. Therefore, falsity does not resonate, and falsity will give you dis-ease, and disease is a result of that. So if we can start to understand that humans benefit from truth, not just psychologically and mentally, but health-wise, then we're going to be in a much better situation, and here on planet Earth. And so getting the truth out is really, you know, a vote for health of the human race. And they are in great need of healing at this time, needless to say. So that's what really the effort is, in part here, to raise awareness, to have people understand that if there are battles going on eons with the Anunnaki in the Middle East and other races, and why we are at odds with Iran and the races that Iran is associated with, and why we are actually already at war with North Korea, because North Korea has been backed by a certain ET race, and our real war is with that ET race and not necessarily the North Koreans. So this is what we have to start to understand about the wars going on here on and off the planet, that we are part of those wars, that they are being conducted behind our backs, and our soldiers are dying in them. They're being utilized in them. Their minds are being wiped, but nonetheless, they are fighting those wars on our behalf. And it is very vitally important that humans start to come awake and aware. And the fact that Robert David Seal was unable to join me on this broadcast, in spite of the fact that I sent him this information before the broadcast, he was in full consciousness about it. However, he got direction from outside, one can imagine. Knowing that he is a member of a certain group, and he is himself working as a good guy, really, to disclose certain information, but he has found that as we say, the secret space, the real story about the ET intervention here on planet Earth, is something that he's not allowed to elaborate on, in spite of the fact that he did go on Alex Jones and allude to it. And he never backed off what he stated, which is that he understood there to be 10,000 humans on Mars who were never coming home, some of whom were sent there as children. So this is the kind of information that, if you do not put that together with things like the fires in Northern California, the fact that that is a directed energy weapon, it appears that it may be a laser-based directed energy weapon. There's a very good video that I've linked on my website, and has to do with that. I made a post to that recently, and there is more to this story, but it appears they're also trying to relocate those humans that were located on pieces of land in Northern California, where the value has gone up. It's skyrocketed because of, in part, the wine, the sort of value of the wine from Northern California, and the fact that they settled there prior to that sort of explosion, if you want to call it. And there may be another deeper message behind the scenes to do with the slash and burn that's going on in Northern California, having to do with the ET presence. This also links up with the reason for the hurricanes, that were directed weapons at the United States by the United States. So it's important to know that there's a portion of the United States Illuminati that were fully on board to directing those weapons on their own shores in order to decimate certain areas of Florida, etc., and various places, Puerto Rico, islands, and so on. In other words, this story involves a war with the United States, a war with the part of the free part of the United States that involves trying to get your guns away from you so that you cannot defend yourself and your family against the invasion of the various races of ETs, the various invasionary forces possibly coming from China and North Korea in the future, and possibly even going on now behind our backs, etc. So this war that is being conducted is orchestrated. And again, if you do not link these things together, you're not going to get the context. You are not going to understand what is really going on. And I want to applaud my colleagues who have begun to become more aware, such as Linda Moulton Howe, and have begun to have more courage to speak out about the ET presence here on planet Earth. That's very valuable. She is doing a good service, as are others, some of whom are much more knowledgeable than they make out to be, and who have been, I would say, sort of pussyfooting around the real invasion scenario because they don't want to be seen to be, I guess, going against the mainstream, or not having the following that they currently have, or whatever their fears are. Unfortunately, it means that they are not being completely truthful to you, but that's the way things go. So it's important to understand that there are members of my so-called colleagues who are as knowledgeable as I am, or nearly so, I would say. So again, what I'm talking about here is the context. Now, there is a book by David Jacobs, who recently, he's an investigator, a person who's been, I guess, regressing people, abductees for many, many years, and his work is very well known. He has been highlighting, of course, the gray ET invasion, the gray human hybrids that have been coming to Earth and have been, which human females have facilitated this sort of invasion against their will, obviously being abducted, etc. Some, of course, are willing participants, may even be related by DNA, etc. However, David Jacobs has written a new book called Walking Among Us. I have invited him for an interview and not gotten an answer, which is something that happens pretty often. So I don't know if it's because the people aren't getting the information. In other words, they're not getting my emails, or whether they, don't appreciate my work, or whether they are actually afraid to come on my show, and or they simply don't appreciate the work. So I'm not sure what's going on, or whether it's my emails have been what you might call waylaid, or by the secret space program and the deep state, etc. So I want to say that David Jacobs has written a book called Walking Among Us, and I highly recommend it. And I want to say that it is all about how gray human hybrids are being taught how to deal with humanity and how to mix with the human race here on Earth, how they are being trained by abductees, etc. So there's a very nefarious agenda going on with respect to the gray human hybrids and other hybrid races that are infiltrating the planet at this time, and have been for quite some time. There have been genetic experiments going on endlessly, and our military has been fully involved in a lot of them. There is said to be a positive side to this sort of hybridization, I guess you might say, of humanity. And humans are already ET hybrids. So this is like an expansion on that scenario. So it's like taking a hybrid race and further hybridizing it. And that's what's going on. There are lots of implications to these actions on behalf of the secret space program and the various ET races, some of whom operate in violation of treaties with the secret space program and have been doing so for years. So why does that matter? Because it's important to understand that these wars that are being fought both on and off the planet, that some of the secrets, super soldiers are being used as, you might say, go-betweens. Some are hybrids themselves. Some come from other races. They have agendas, and those races are not necessarily here operating for the benefit of humanity. So they're called sleeping abductees, or sleeping Manchurian candidates, sleeping assassins. These are all part of this scenario. So it's time that people start to put the pieces together in a real way, not just a superficial way, and start to understand that there's nothing going on planet Earth that does not involve our ET heritage, that does not involve our constant interactions every day with individuals who are of varying degrees of off-planet bloodlines, and myself included. We are all members of various ET races, and we relate and are also loyal to those races. Some of us without conscious, thought about it, being more programmed than anything. This is a very common occurrence, of course. So when you're dealing with a human, you're dealing with another race. You're dealing with multiple races, in fact, because as a hybrid, we are a blend of those races. We are a blend of the positive qualities of those races as well as the negative qualities. And if you are dealing with somebody who you instinctually do not trust and do not like, it means that you may be on a subliminal level aware that they come from a race that is your natural enemy, if you want to call it that, off planet. So this is a whole different way of understanding what it is to be human here on planet Earth. And since 2012, the gloves are off. We are an ascension planet. We are fully qualified, and I refer you to the work of Ashiana Dean on my front page. You can find the books that I have linked on the front page there. And also want to say that, let's see if I can bring them up on the screen here. It's kind of an interesting dynamic trying to work two computers at once, but I think this will work. So there's a guy named Robert Tisk, and I think that's how you say his last name, as well as Ashiana Dean. So you see right here on my website on the front page, if you haven't read these books, you are uninformed and you are not prepared to understand the bigger picture of what's going on planet Earth. So on a very nuts and bolts way, what Robert Tisk did, who is a former television producer, is he went onto the internet and gathered a great deal of the information to do with Dulce and the various races involved with Dulce, as well as the human ET wars going on behind the scenes to do with the military, etc. And he writes about it in a way in which I think is very easy for the common person to understand. Ashiana Dean, however, her books are much more complex. They do outline our ET human heritage going back eons and off planet, and the various wars between the races, etc. Again, required reading. If you want to get one of these books is now available as a PDF. It's the second version. It's let's see, you call it, it's been a re-release of volume 2, and that's $20 as a PDF. So you can easily purchase it. And you can click, I think it's the book on the right here on my website to get that. And the one on the left has been available. I think it's around $27 as a hardback. I don't believe it's in, PDF form. So what's happening here is that these individuals have put together a huge history of the things that Camelot has been interviewing witnesses over now for many years in bits and pieces. And so if you put all this information together, you're going to start to understand the real war going on here on planet Earth. The fact that we have very positive ET races who are very much trying to keep us alive. And then we have other races that are helping to conduct wars and are working behind the scenes to actually sabotage our secret space program. And this, in fact, was backed up by the testimony of William Tompkins before he died. Now, I'm going to actually go off camera briefly here while I do some investigation. I need to try to bring a couple things onto my desktop for the next part of this discussion. So bear with me. We'll just take a short break here. So stand by. Okay, so I'm back. So I was hoping to be able to bring on the screen this information about what the members of the Tom DeLonge group are actually, who they are affiliated with, etc. And I've got some of that information now for you. And I want to discuss that. So my previous section has been all about the ET human sort of interaction here on planet Earth and how these false flags are part of all of that. And there's a lot to that story, more than I have time to go into here today. But I'm going to attempt to bring in a few other sort of facts and various information to augment what I've already been talking about here. So in terms of, I'm going to use my other computer here, there is, according to DeLonge, these are the backgrounds of the people that he's had on stage, for one thing, some of who didn't say anything, actually, I don't think, but who are written about on his website. So he says he has a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, a former Senior Intelligence Officer of the CIA, and then the former Advanced Systems Director of Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, the former Director of Programs to investigate unidentified aerial threats, in other words, UFOs, for the US government. That's the Alessandro person, and a group of distinguished physicists, among which I believe Hal Puthoff is a member. And he says they have a geneticist and a molecular biologist, and those people I believe are talked about on the website but were not on stage. And then he calls himself an award-winning storyteller, and maybe is referring to the author of his book that was out there recently called Secret Machines, which I did read. And it's, you know, it's a fair effort at a sort of a quasi sci-fi type of, you know, disclosure on a very rudimentary level. And I appreciate the effort. You know, making movies is nothing new in this area, and disclosing information through the movies, of course. So you know that Hollywood has been doing this forever. And any movie you see, in fact, that especially ones involving a sci-fi scenario, are going to be disclosing some of this information that I've been talking about, acting as though, you know, they're sort of plausible deniability aspect of that is that they can say that it's just in a movie, and so it's not real. On the contrary, if it's in a movie, it's quite possibly and most definitely real. And in fact, if humans have thought of it, it probably exists somewhere in some galaxy, if not our own. So you could kind of look at the world in a much more open-minded way if you consider that. So what we're talking about here are individuals who are going to come forward, and they have left their former jobs, because they're all former, right? They're not current. And this is, again, a sort of a slight breakaway or a division from the deep state / what we call the secret space program and secret government, so that they can divorce themselves if necessary, if these people and their efforts come to no avail, etc. So this is the way our government is choosing to disclose at this time. There's another aspect to this that has happened recently. In fact, there was just an article today in a British newspaper, which really harks back to another to this woman who is apparently had come out. She is related to Pence by way of a marriage, I think of her daughter or somebody. I'm not sure. I forget the exact relationship. Anyway, she is someone who is involved in running for office. Her relation, the relation that she has in her family is related to Pence. I don't know if it's someone married to one of his sons, a son or a daughter or something of this nature. I don't have that information in front of me. I can get it if necessary. I think it was in the Telegraph today. Again, part of an ongoing soft disclosure to try to get people to understand that this person, for example, has been claiming she was abducted many years ago. I believe her original testimony came out in 2009, and now it's coming out on the paper again. This is all to back up this soft disclosure that DeLong is part of, and that these individuals who have resigned from their jobs apparently to support this effort and to try to create a bridge to bring the secrets into the mainstream in such a way that they will not be, well, let's say, lynched by mobs for the number of secrets they have kept from humanity for so long, to the detriment of humanity, I might add. So it's understandable that they're trying to disclose because they have to, because the ETs are basically saying time is up. The reptilians are doing this forcefully. There are various other races, even according to the Oceanidine second edition, which said that in 2017, they would be revealing themselves. So you can appreciate that this is October of 2017, that they don't have many months left. So that in essence, if they don't disclose, if the humans don't disclose, the ETs will do it for them, is really the threat. And that's really interesting. I mean, we're kind of in an interesting situation as a result of this kind of pressure. But it's a natural pressure because we are fully and totally a part of a galactic community at this time. We are no longer off bounds to any races, if we ever were. And there's some discussion as to whether or not indeed there was a prevention for complete invasion. I know there has been a protection to humans to allow this genome to develop to a certain extent, but all gloves are off, as I say now, and have been since 2012, since we became an ascension planet. And this is crucial. What does that mean? That means the stargates are fully operational. That means that some of those stargates can actually take you off planet and into higher dimensions permanently. So you could call it an escape hatch, if you will. Some people believe that incarnation is a form of slavery. I believe it's voluntary, but nonetheless, regardless of how you think about it, the fact that there is a war over these stargates, and there has been a war over stargates on planet Earth, and over portals, and over the portal technology, and technology such as Looking Glass, which we discussed with Dan Burish many, many years ago, and has been operational on planet Earth. And this is time travel technology by which they can see their futures, such as Yellow Book, and other technology that has also been shared with and gotten from the various ET races, in addition to their other technologies involving things that could be turned into weapon systems, things that already were weapon systems, and so on. So all of this must be disclosed. Humanity must become aware as a total unit on planet Earth. In other words, it's not going to be good enough, in my view, for us to go forward as a planet with some of the people on the planet fully, I guess 80 to 90%, being completely into the dark as to what the hell they're doing here and what we're part of. So it's time that people start to recognize that. And my efforts have, of course, been along these lines for many, many years, as have others. And I applaud every one of them, regardless of how even superficial, in some cases, their efforts may have been. So now I just want to go down this list further because I have more details to talk about. And go back to this. Okay, I just lost this document. Not sure why that happened. At any rate, I can take it off the top of my head if necessary. I can say that, wow. Okay. Things always happen for a reason. Okay, well, at any rate, what I want to do is also talk about my recent interview with Courtney Brown and Daz Smith about the remote viewing of Tunguska and Area 51. If you haven't seen that show, I highly recommend it. And I do want to say that during that show, Courtney reveals something that he's never done before, and it's quite a substantial reveal. And it does tally right along with this soft disclosure, which is now gaining ground, you could say. And he said that all of his remote viewing and viewers have been able to be helped along in their process by ETs. And this is, to me, a no-brainer, not surprising. I can certainly say that I have always been helped in Project CAMELOT by the various ETs behind the scenes who are helping me, as well as human, as people on the human side assisting me. And I am not surprised that there's ET help for Courtney's team. But as a matter of fact, his disclosure came as a surprise to Daz Smith, who apparently had never been told that by Courtney until he said it on the air on my show. Now, why does that matter? What it means is that the viewers who are using basically military protocols to remote view both past and future events, and he's been doing this program for quite a while, have actually had ET help. And this is only one program. So if this is a public program of remote viewers, I hope that you can make the leap to understanding that the militaries, governments have been using remote viewers now ever since the techniques were discovered, if you want to call it that, to say nothing of psychics and so on, telepaths, so on and so forth. In other words, these individuals who are able to cross time and space with their minds, with their consciousness, and to report back. This is something that the military have, of course, been doing. The American military, the Russian military, Chinese, the Indians from India, all the different countries you can appreciate have remote viewers. You would be a completely stupid government if you didn't have military remote viewers on your staff. And it's also a very extensive part of this war with various ET races and on and off the planet between viewers who are also remote viewing incidents in the past as well as looking at the future. And it's important to understand that this revelation by Courtney Brown will be something that is true also for the for the human remote viewers in various military programs who no doubt are being assisted by ETs. And I can tell you that the secret space program is well aware that I am being assisted by ETs, and proof of that can be found in one of the latest incidents that happened to me a few months ago, several months ago. I was supposedly invited to do an audition for the military, for ostensibly a television show. And this show was going to supposedly be like another, aliens, ancient aliens or whatever kind, those various kind of reality type shows. And they wanted to interview me supposedly for it. The topic they had chosen had to do with the Grand Canyon. And that's a very interesting topic. And as many people will know, there's a lot of controversy and mystery around what is in the Grand Canyon and supposed gold that is buried in the Grand Canyon. that Phoenix, actually entire city of Phoenix, actually sits on what is the next essence civilization that looked a lot like Egypt. And so there'll be incredible monuments and buildings, et cetera, that are all buried at this time that the military is fully aware of, by the way, and so on. So this has a historical precedent and so on. And so they ostensibly asked me for an interview. Then they had me come down to San Diego, where they had rented a studio that was basically in the outer limits of San Diego, that was run by two very experienced camera people that were, very, okay, my network. Oh, wow. Okay, this is just my other computer having sort of logged itself out. So that's what's happening there. Anyway, I was brought down to this place, and I was interviewed for 2 hours on camera. And this basically this agent, who I believe is, member of the CIA, sat opposite me a short distance away, right next to the camera that was focused on me. There were no other people auditioning. I was the only one, and they basically had me, sort of peppered me with questions for nonstop for 2 hours or longer, and all about the Grand Canyon and what I might know about that. And the fact is, I had written to them ahead of time saying, actually, if you want to do this this program, then sorry about this. Let me see if I can get this other computer to work, because I have this. Oh, okay, I lost my connection. It's really not helpful. Okay, let me see. What can I do? Hold on a second. There's another way to do this. Okay, so now I'll use the YouTube thing, because this other one isn't working right. So in essence, they interviewed me for 2 hours, as I say, ostensibly so that they could, basically find out what I know. But I told them that I know very little, which is more or less true. I shared whatever I did know. However, the bottom line is, I believe they were trying to get the sort of ET side of the things, of information that flows through me. That's what they were really trying to tap into. And so they were using this ploy, because they know I want to make a television show, to invite me into a studio to pretend that it was going to be a television show, and so forth, when in fact the whole thing was just, in order to find out what I know, in essence, not to find out what I know, but to find out what my ET contacts know. So this is the kind of thing going on. And this, of course, happens to abductees all the time. They may not realize that's what's really happening when they're re-abducted by the military after being abducted by the ETs in the first place. So this type of thing, Melinda Leslie can tell you, goes on all the time. It's an interesting dynamic. And again, these are the ways in which it's important to understand that if we have billions of galaxies and billions of planets, whether they're Earth-like or not, of which a huge number are, then inevitably there's going to be life, millions and trillions of life forms. And those life forms cannot all be known by the military-industrial complex or the secret space program. And those various ETs are contacting them in some cases. But in many cases, they're dealing directly with the humans and through the humans here on planet Earth. And so that puts the military in a very disadvantaged position. So they must keep contact with you. They must surveil you. They must try to get as much information from you as possible. Otherwise, they cannot possibly do their job as they see it to defend the planet Earth, if that is their objective. And in other cases, to combat some of these races, to go to war with some of these races, to prevent entree by these races, And all of that is very difficult when these races don't necessarily even need craft in order to make contact. They can simply come through a portal. And this is going on constantly. And humans themselves are a form of portal. We are a spiraling portal of energy that has, again, resonance. And our Merkaba, what is called the Merkaba, is a form of a portal. It is a craft. It is a non-physical craft, but nonetheless, it goes into interdimensional. And this is what we're capable of. We are time travelers, of course, by nature. So I understand that I'm jumping around a lot, and some people may not be able to connect all these dots very easily, but I think if you play this sort of dissertation that I'm giving here, which I'm doing unexpectedly simply because of the way this circumstance happened, I think you'll find the information is valuable and actually does stand the test of time, so to speak. Now, I wanted to allude to some of these other things that I have covered, and so if you're going to bear with me, I'm going to find my notes here and make sure that I'm not missing anything, because this is just a very good opportunity to go into these various things. And so, hold on one second here. Okay, and I do just want to say briefly about the so-called link of Israel or the Zionists to the Anunnaki. It is this link that is basically responsible for the sort of focus on Israel that you get with a lot of sort of people and organizations and so on, and a lot of accusations that they are very instrumental in our government, which indeed they are. So this has to do, again, with a race of beings. It has to do with the Anunnaki and their bloodline link up with the Israelis, which also extends to the Arabs and other related races. And so there's a great deal of Anunnaki DNA on the planet as a result, to some degree, of their infiltration during the time that was about 12,000 years ago, when they interfered with the human genome in a big way and put in a frequency fence to make us age, only last a certain amount of years, and also to dumb us down on certain levels. All of that related to the junk DNA that is now activated as a result of us becoming a part of basically an ascension planet, but also activated through the energetics that have been assisting us to wake people up, actually in a natural kind of a way, and turn on a lot of their DNA and a rising in consciousness. And this rising in consciousness is actually, you might say, it's communicative. In other words, it's like a disease, except on the positive side, it's catching. So if you're around a person or you attend an event in which you've got a lot of awakened people, it's very likely that your DNA and yourself are going to become more awakened and more enlightened as time goes on. And if you interact with other people after that, you will carry that signature with you. And so it goes. This is really what's going on here. So you don't need to despair. Humans are waking up. It is catching. You will likely catch it if it hasn't happened to you already, and end up watching this broadcast as a result, and maybe even eventually doing your own broadcast. And so this is really what it's all about. Now, I did want to highlight one other thing that was part of the To the Stars disclosure information. They actually said that they're going to be starting a kind of it sounded like a UFO database, a sighting database, or also abduction reporting database. So what they really want to do is to continue the military trend of surveilling you, of getting you to report the ETs that are out there that are getting in through the portals, the ones that they may not have seen or been aware of, the ones that got under their radar, and so on. So they are, as part of this so-called Tom DeLonge effort, going to be continuing this process. And of course, MUFON and other organizations have been getting you to call in and to write in and so on and share your sighting, your abduction, your whatever. And this is all going to help the military in their job. What they are not telling you that, of course, the stars individuals, they are also looking for storylines from you. So this will also facilitate that process. In essence, they want you to help make their disclosure a reality, and they can't do it without you. So please be aware of that. In other words, we are the disclosers, the real disclosers. We are the ones who have the knowledge, and they know that. And so understand that you do not have to pay money. And I understand they've already raised some money, because actually they should be funded by the black programs that have been stealing money from you for eons. And there's a money trail that you can look on the whitehatsreport.com website to follow if you like. You can look into Catherine Austin Fitts and her work and others. But the bottom line is that we, the American public and other countries, individuals in other countries, have been funding the secret space program now for a good 60 years. And therefore, they have plenty of money to fund this new effort to slowly but surely release information to you that you should have had, again, 60 years ago. They should be able to finance themselves. They have the money. And there is a sort of surprisingly disappointing aspect to this new organization that attempts to do disclosure while at the same time trying to raise money from you, who are the disclosers, and facilitate their sort of get out of jail free card. Now, I fully agree with the premise that these individuals that are part of your military have been fighting a war on your behalf and are to be commended for the good side of that they are part of. For the other side, which has been oppressing you and taking your DNA against your will and the fluids, and also killing a lot of your children and various other individuals that get so-called lost in national parks by the thousands, millions, whatever, and the missing children all over the planet, and the various so-called natural, what are called natural disasters, which are caused by a lot of their weather weapons that are orchestrated constantly around the globe and are being orchestrated as we speak in, for example, Northern California. In other words, you do not need to pay them any more money in order to facilitate them disclosing the truth. The truth is actually free, and it will set you free and hopefully them free so that they can actually conduct a better life in the future, so that they can contribute to the human race and to what's going on this planet in a positive way. So all of this works together. I'm not going to go on for many more hours here. I think I've kind of covered a huge gamut of information. I do have a recent conversation, as I mentioned, on my website that I want to refer you to, that has to do with, it has a few of these sort of bits and pieces. There are a few articles on the front page. One of them is called Conversation. It's actually called A Conversation with a Curious Friend. You'll find some very interesting statements there, and I do recommend that. Obviously, and I'm actually gonna go and share my screen here for a second. Again, this will show you my website again, where I've got, as I say, here's the directed energy laser weapon. The video is linked there that has some very good information, some of the best information I've heard in regarding to the fires in Northern California, what's really going on there, and the evidence of the zoning along which these fires are actually tracking. And a woman who has revealed this actually revealed it before the actual attack happened. And then the conversation with a curious friend here, where I have actually last night conducted conversation with some individuals, and I shared my side of the conversation. So I don't reveal their side, but I share a lot of really good links, etc. So I want to recommend that you see that article. It's very important. Obviously, I've had shows on recently that are very important today. Later today, we'll be talking to Paladin, the White Hat, and that link is here. And the to the Stars disclosure, the links and some comments there, also important to see. The Vegas evidence, I've been corralling all the evidence, and I did a show with Betzer and Bennett, which has a lot of the evidence there as well. The remote viewing Tunguska and Area 51 show is there. And I was interviewed lately by Alexandra, who was working with, I think, a division of what was called Ripsonar News. I think they are from Poland, but I'm not sure. And then certainly my latest show with Tony Gosling, covering various events and his take on things. He is a good reporter, former BBC reporter who specializes in outing the Bilderberg events. Then, of course, my theory on the War of the Worlds, Mandalay Pirates of Mandalay Bay, part of this ongoing war that we're all part of. And it is going on between the Illuminati and a portion of the U.S. military, which is basically symbolized by the U.S. Navy. And that's not the whole Navy, but part of it. And so the coloring on this background has just gone in a completely bizarre fashion. Anyway, so this is the kind of thing where connecting the dots can really reveal the answers. And as far as Vegas is concerned, I have not seen anyone who has been able to connect the dots on a symbolic level other than myself, and to tap into some of the aspects of this war going on, this ongoing war. And it has to do with the finance, and we will talk more about it today with Paladin at 7 p.m. Pacific time tonight. But please do look at my article there and see how I'm linking up the dots there. This doesn't mean I'm correct, but it is some very good information nonetheless. And there is a lot of evidence, again, that the war within the Illuminati is reflected here with a war against the United States leading up to what is in essence the financial reset. And it involves the US Navy, a portion of which are now defending sacred ground of the human genome here on planet Earth, and who are attempting to come clean and to do disclosure efforts. And William Tompkins was a member of that echelon or group. And I do understand that he was barred from talking to me because they are very, very concerned about their message. And as always, they're trying to sort of, you might say, control the story. So they want to control the spin, and they don't want to bring in this very negative aspect, which is being revealed in the disclosures to do with Harvey Weinstein, one of the Weinstein brothers, who is part of Miramax, who is a very, very successful film production company and has been extremely active in Hollywood, making blockbuster and excellent movies over the past, say, 10 or 20 years. Their name is on nearly everything. And I will say that regardless of Harvey's transgressions in this regard, of which the women have been coming forward and testifying in the public and so on, and kudos to them for doing so with the courage that is necessary to do. I will say, having worked for 20 years and actually worked on a very temporary basis for Miramax, I am familiar with Harvey Weinstein and his brother. And I can say that this is the tip of the iceberg, as I say in one of my articles here, that I can definitely say that since the time of Shirley Temple, of course, that this, the use of, you might call it pedophilia, the use of young women, young boys for sexual and other purposes, the sort of hidden satanic side of Hollywood has been extremely active over the years, that it's only now starting to kind of come to the surface. We're living in a time of truth, and it is inevitable. I don't care what aspect of you're talking about. This is all going to be revealed, and it is coming forward now. It is a time of the unveiling, and this is something Camelot has been heavily involved in over the years. The truth will continue to come forward, and I encourage people who have truth to bring it forward, to stop hiding, and eventually the people who have hidden the truth and been on the side basically supporting non-verbally the perpetrators of lies against humanity for all this time, not only will they know themselves through their own karmic investment or non-investment in the trail of humanity on planet Earth, but eventually a lot of them are going to get revealed. So your alliances at this time are vitally important. Choose your sides carefully. Understand that when you support someone who is, defiling another human being, who is lying to humanity in great droves, who is perpetrating the lie on many levels, that they are going to be sorry eventually. As a soul, they will have a great debt to repay. They will necessarily be reincarnated again and again until their debt is paid. It's worth knowing, especially as the stargates are open, for those who are interested in progressing, for those that would like to leave this sector and progress to other, maybe more, physically in a 3D way, more sort of nice areas of the multiverse to live in, etc., and continue their quest. But, I can say that serving humanity at this time is a very worthwhile venture, that telling the truth, it's almost nothing more important. It's as important as your life, contrary to what a lot of people think. And it is the reason for your life. You could look at it that way. So I guess that's the end of my diatribe here. And I want to thank Robert David Steele for backing out of this conversation with me, because I guess it propelled me to come forward on my own to really reveal things that we probably wouldn't have gotten to in my discussion with him. And please understand that there are a lot of people, they are making contributions to the degree that they are able. At the same time, they're trying to save their own lives and their lives of their families, and that is understandable. This is also what goes on with whistleblowers. And of course, the information in Project Camelot is full of whistleblower testimony. So thanks again for watching Project Camelot. I'll be back at 7 p.m. tonight, Pacific time, talking to Paladin. Tomorrow, I will have a show tomorrow night with Bix Weir, who is going to be talking about the gold in Grand Canyon. He is someone who's done investigation along these lines. He also has quite a background in the financial sector. So we will talk about finance with him on Thursday night as well. So there are more shows coming, and thanks again for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.